Every April, you do the same thing. You drive to the garden center. You pick up a flat of petunias, a tray of marigolds, maybe some impatiens for the shady spot on the porch. You spend $80 or $120. You carry them home, you plant them, and for 6 weeks, your containers look exactly like the photo on the plant tag. Then, July hits. The petunias get leggy and sticky. The marigolds go crispy at the edges. The impatiens collapse in the first heat wave. By August, your pots look like something from the back of a neglected parking lot, and you tell yourself, it's okay, you'll try again next spring. That is exactly what the garden center is counting on. Because here is a number they will never put on a sign. The average American household spends between $600 and $1,200 every single year on annual flowers. Not on tools, not on soil, not on furniture. On flowers that are biologically designed to die. Flowers with no root system deep enough to survive a frost. Flowers that were bred for one season of shelf appeal and then planned obsolescence. Run that number over 20 years. That is $12,000 to $24,000. Gone into plastic trays and compost heaps and the quiet satisfaction of an industry that requires your failure to survive. Now consider that there are 13 plants, perennial plants, that you can drop into a container this season and never, ever replace. Plants that come back every spring, that divide into free plants you can fill more pots with. Plants that in 10 years will look more architectural and more expensive than anything you ever bought off a flat cart. The garden center does not want you to know their names. Stay with me. Because number 12 on this list is the one that will make every professional landscape designer within earshot quietly furious that you now know what they charge hundreds of dollars an hour to put in their plants. Before we get to the plants, you need to understand how the annual flower industry actually works, because once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. The business model is simple. Breed plants that perform spectacularly in April and May, when garden centers need to move product. Make them quick to flower, so they look incredible in a 4-inch pot under fluorescent lights. Sell them, watch them die. Repeat every spring. Annual flowers are not selected for survival. They're selected for the point of purchase. The perennial plant, by contrast, is the garden center's worst nightmare. You buy it once, it comes back. It gets bigger. It eventually divides into plants you harvest for free. The more years it grows, the less you need to spend. That math does not work for a business built on replacement. Now let's talk about what actually thrives in a container year after year. I am going to break these 13 plants into 3 roles, because this is how professional designers think, and it is why their containers always look intentional instead of accidental. The thrillers, the fillers, the spillers. Your containers need all 3. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which perennial belongs in each role, and exactly why. Trillers. These are the plants that make someone stop on the sidewalk. 1. Agapanthus, the lily of the Nile. Most plants punish you for ignoring them. They wilt, they yellow, they tell you in every possible way that you have been negligent. Agapanthus does the opposite. Crowd its roots into a pot. Let it sit slightly ignored. Let the container get borderline too small for what is growing inside it, and this plant responds by detonating. Massive globes of blue or white flowers, sometimes 6 inches across, exploding up on tall stems above long, strap-shaped leaves. Each bloom looks like a firework, frozen at the exact moment of peak expansion. And the tighter you pack the roots, the more of them you get. This is the container secret that nurseries never explain on the tag. Agapanthus is one of the only plants in existence that deliberately flowers better when its roots are slightly crowded. The confinement mimics a stress signal that the plant interprets as a reason to reproduce. It stops chasing root extension and starts pouring every resource into seed production, which means flowers. Flowers in quantities that look almost impossible from a plant this size in a container this small. In zones 7 through 11, it lives outdoors year-round. In colder zones, move the container into a garage or sheltered porch before hard frost. The crown goes dormant. The roots wait. Spring comes, and it reloads. But here is the mistake that destroys more agapanthus containers than any frost ever will. People repot it every spring. They see the roots crowding the drainage holes and they panic. They move it into a larger container. They break the stress signal entirely. The plant shifts back into vegetative growth, puts all its energy into roots, and spends the next 2 years producing almost nothing. It does not punish you for kindness. It simply stops rewarding you. Leave it alone. Let it crowd. Let it be slightly root-bound. Give it 6 hours of sun. Water it consistently through the growing season, and then watch what happens in June. The glowed flowers are what professional designers charge you to look at in their portfolios. You can produce them on your porch for the cost of one plant. 2. Hosta, the shade queen. There is a shady corner somewhere near your door, or your porch, or under the edge of your roof, where annuals soak, where the whole thing looks like an apology instead of a garden. Plant a hosta there, not a small one. Not the $4 plant from the clearance rack. A named variety, something with leaves the size of dinner plates, leaves the color of deep blue-green or golden chartreuse that glow like they are lit from the inside, even in full shade. Here is what the tag will never mention. In the ground, hostas are destroyed by slugs. Those soft, paddle-shaped leaves are a banquet for every slug within 100-foot radius. The leaves look like someone spent a morning with a hole punch. By August, the most beautiful hosta in your garden bed has been reduced to a collection of perforated rags. In a container, the slugs cannot reach them. The pot elevates the leaves above the slug traffic. The foliage stays clean, unmarked, architectural, exactly the way it looks in every magazine photograph. By year 3, a container hosta looks like something you bought from a luxury nursery for $200. By year 5, you are dividing it into 2 or 3 plants, each one worth $60 at retail, each one yours for free. Sum and Substance will give you leaves 18 inches across that glow gold chartreuse and morning light. Halcyon delivers powder blue foliage with a natural slug resistance built into the leaf texture. Patriot gives you deep forest green with crisp white margins that look hand-painted by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Zones 3 through 9. One of the widest cold hardiness ranges of any shade plant in American horticulture. The mistake nearly everyone makes with container hostas is placement. They put them in deep shade and wonder why the color fades. Hostas do not want deep shade. They want bright, indirect light. Morning sun with afternoon shade is ideal. Dappled light under a high canopy is perfect. 2 hours of gentle direct sun, then shade for the rest of the day. Make that one adjustment and the color intensity will change within 2 weeks. That single move is worth more than any fertilizer you could buy. 3. Echinacea, the native wildflower your potassium is missing. Walk through any vacant lot in America in July and you will find it. Purple keenflower, Echinacea purpurea, growing wild in cracked ground, in compacted soil, in places where nothing else is trying, and it is blooming. Hard. Now imagine that on your patio. Modern dwarf cultivars, the Sombrero series, the Butterfly series, varieties specifically bred to stay compact in containers, win that same indestructible July through October bloom window to a 16-inch pot. They do not flop. They do not sprawl. They stand upright, structured, covered in flowers with swept-back petals and a raised bronze cone at the center that deepens in color as the season progresses. Monarch butterflies find them. Goldfinches find them in fall and cling to the seed heads through winter. Swallowtails work them constantly throughout summer. A single established coneflower container turns a bare patio into a wildlife corridor. Zones 3 through 9. Tolerates heat. Tolerates poor soil. Once established, it barely needs watering. The mistake that costs coneflower growers their best results is cutting the plants down in fall cleanup. Those seed heads that remain after the petals drop are not dead flowers. They're a winter food source that goldfinches depend on from October through February. Leave them standing. The architectural quality of those dried cones with frost on them in January is genuinely beautiful, and the wildlife activity around them through the coldest months makes your patio feel alive when everything else has gone gray and empty. 4. Rudbeckia, the annual marigold's superior replacement. You have been buying marigolds for years. Every spring, same flat, same orange, same cheerful mediocrity. They peak for 6 weeks, then spend the rest of the season looking exhausted and resentful. By September, when the light turns golden and the air goes cool, and your containers should look their absolute best. The marigolds are finished. Brown stems, no flowers, empty pots that you are already mentally planning to replant next April. Rudbeckia fulgida goldsturm does not work that way. It blooms from July through October. That is 4 months of golden yellow daisy flowers with near black chocolate centers that deepen in intensity as autumn arrives, not fading toward the end of the season, deepening and getting richer. Compact varieties like Little Gold Star were bred specifically for container life. They stay tight and upright, produce an extraordinary number of blooms simultaneously, and require almost no deadheading to keep going. One mature container Rudbeckia produces between 80 and 120 flowers at peak bloom, not over the season, at one time. University horticultural trials have documented that the goldsturm cultivar blooms longer, more profusely, and more reliably than the standard species. This is not catalog language. This is measured, published research from institutions that test plant performance under real conditions in real American climates. And after the flowers finish, the seedheads feed birds through winter. Zones 4 through 9, plant it once. Watch it perform better every year as the root system strengthens. By year 3, it is more impressive than it was at planting. By year 5, you are dividing it into free plants that you never paid for. Stop buying marigolds. This is the moment in the video where most creators would ask you to subscribe as a formality, something to skip past on your way to the next tip. I am asking for a different reason. If you are in your 50s or 60s, if you have spent too many springs replacing things that did not survive winter, if you have ever stood at a garden center register wondering where you are spending this money again, this channel was built specifically for you. Real plant knowledge, zone-specific guidance, the information that saves you from another season of the same cycle. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell. The next video is already coming, and you should not miss it. The fillers, mounding, textural, the plants that give your containers volume, depth, and reliable color without demanding constant attention. 5. Heuchera, the color that never goes dormant. Every other plant on this list earns its keep by blooming. Heuchera earns its keep by existing. Deep burgundy that appears almost black in certain light. Electric chartreuse that illuminates the darkest corner of a shaded porch. Warm amber that shifts through the season, looking completely different in May than it does in October. Caramel, silver, near purple, rose. These are not flower colors. These are leaf colors, present from the moment the plant breaks dormancy in spring until hard freeze in fall. In zones 7 through 9, year-round, you are not waiting for the bloom season. You have color in your containers from the first week of April onward, regardless of what else is happening. Palace purple delivers leaves that look almost black in low light. One of the most dramatic foliage effects available in container gardening at any price point. Leinrichi is the electric chartreuse variety that makes shady corners feel lit from within. Caramel produces warm amber-orange tones that look genuinely different every month from April through October, as if the plant is slowly, deliberately changing its outfit. Zones 4 through 9. Divide every 3 to 4 years. Each division is a free plant. The mistake that costs heuchera growers their most intense color is deep shade. People place it in the darkest corner of the porch and then wonder why it looks washed out. Heuchera produces its most saturated color in bright indirect light, or 2 to 3 hours of gentle morning sun. Not deep shade. Bright, indirect, filtered light. Move your heuchera containers to where they catch the first 2 hours of morning sun and watch the color intensity transform within 2 weeks. That one adjustment does more for the appearance of your containers than any fertilizer ever will. 6. Hellebore, the plant that blooms while the ground is still frozen. It is February. Your neighbors are looking at empty pots, bare soil, the gray nothing of late winter. You walk out onto your porch, and your containers are covered in flowers. Plum, deep burgundy, soft pink, cream, near black flowers that nod gently on strong stems, while everything around them is still dormant. Hellebore blooms from December through April in most American zones. That is 4 months of flowers, during the exact window when gardeners are most desperate for color and most likely to find nothing. The garden center is not yet open. The perennial beds have not woken up, and your hellebore containers are already at peak performance. The Ice and Roses series, widely available across American nurseries and online retailers, represents the most reliable and container-adapted hellebores currently bred. Ice and Roses Red gives you deep burgundy flowers from December through March. Wedding Party delivers pearl white double flowers from January through April. Penny's Pink produces soft pink with darker veining. All three are evergreen. The foliage is thick, glossy, deeply divided, and architectural year-round. Zones 4 through 9. In Zones 4 and 5, position containers against a protected south-facing wall before hard freeze. But here is the detail that separates the gardeners who get spectacular hellebore containers from those who get disappointing ones. The flowers nod. They face downward by design, which means in a ground planting, you have to get on your knees to see them. In a container, elevated on a porch railing, a bench, or a step, the flowers hang at eye level. You see them directly. You see the color, the texture, the intricate veining inside the flower that you would miss entirely if the plant were growing in the ground. The container is not a compromise for hellebore. It is the correct way to grow it. 7. Catmint. The plant the garden center makes far more money not telling you about. Every spring, the front tables at every garden center in America are loaded with petunias. The production numbers are staggering. Petunias need deadheading every few days. They need weekly fertilizing. They collapse in heat and have to be cut back mid-season and coaxed to rebloom. And they die at first frost, requiring complete replacement the following spring. Catmint requires one trim per season. No fertilizer after the first year. Comes back stronger every spring for a decade. The only reason more American gardeners are not growing catmint in containers is that garden centers make significantly more money selling you petunias annually. That is not a theory. That is a business model. Walker's Low, the most container-adapted cultivar, produces clouds of blue-purple flowers on arching silver-gray stems from May through October. 6 months. Most annuals cannot deliver 6 months of continuous color. Catmint does it every single year at no additional cost. When the first bloom flush fades in July, cut the entire plant back by half. Not a light trim. Half. It will look severe for about 10 days. Then new growth pushes up from the base, and within 3 weeks, you have a second bloom flush as rich and full as the first. Many plants produce a third flush in early fall. 3 complete bloom cycles. May through September. From one plant, in one container. The aromatic foliage repels deer at the approach stage before they even attempt to taste it. Unlike spray repellents that wash off in the first rain and require reapplying every 2 weeks, catmint is the repellent. It is always on. Zones 3 through 8, drought tolerant once established. Water once weekly through peak summer heat, then less as temperatures drop. 8. Sedum Autumn Fire, the drought architect. Every container on your porch needs a plant that does not care whether you watered it this week. Sedum Autumn Fire is that plant. Each leaf stores water inside its own tissue like a built-in reservoir. When you forget to water in August during the hottest, driest stretch of the summer, sedum does not punish you with wilting and yellowing. It manages its own moisture deficit using systems more sophisticated than anything you could apply from the outside. Spring brings tight rosettes of fresh blue-green. Summer develops the full architecture of the plant. Fall triggers the transition from pink to deep copper red on the flower heads, the peak ornamental value of the entire year. Winter, leaves, dried seed heads, and sturdy upright stems that provide architectural structure through frost and snow. Here is the detail most gardening content never explains correctly. Sedum planted in rich, fertilized, heavily amended soil grows tall, floppy, and structurally weak. Sedum planted in lean, slightly poor soil stays compact, intensely colored, and architectural. The plant does not need your help. It needs you to stop helping. Do not fertilize it. Do not amend the soil beyond basic quality potting mix. Give it a lean environment in full sun, and it will reward your neglect with the best color display in your container garden by October. Zones 3 through 9 gets more attractive and substantial every year without any intervention required. 9. Perennial Salvia, the 3-season purple machine. The annual salvia sold at every garden center is a completely different plant. What you are looking for is the perennial species, Salvia nemorosa, which blooms not once but in waves across the entire growing season, comes back reliably every spring, and deepens in performance every year as the root system matures. Deep violet to purple flower spikes on strong upright stems, 18 to 24 inches tall. The color so saturated, it does not fade in heat, does not wash out in bright sun. Holds that rich jewel-toned purple from the moment the flowers open until you cut it back. First bloom in late spring. Cut it back hard, down to 4 to 6 inches. Within 3 weeks, a full second flush of bloom follows. Cut it back again, and many plants produce a third flush in early fall. 3 complete bloom cycles from one plant in one season. Highly drought-tolerant once established. Genuinely deer-resistant, because the aromatic foliage that smells beautiful to you is deeply unappealing to deer. And a consistent draw for hummingbirds, bumblebees, and every pollinator species that works your neighborhood. Zones 4 through 9. The most water-efficient container perennial on this entire list. 10. Dianthus, the living fragrance station. There is a moment on a warm evening, sitting on your porch with a drink in your hand, when a smell reaches you before you have even looked for it. Something spiced and sweet and completely unexpected. Rich like cloves, warm like vanilla, floral in a way that does not smell synthetic. You look over, and the source is a single container of Dianthus, blooming quietly 3 feet away. No candle company in the world can replicate that moment. No diffuser produces it. It happens organically, without effort, because you planted one container plant and left it alone. Dianthus, cottage pinks. Stay compact. Keep the blue-gray foliage attractive year-round and produce fringed flowers in deep pinks, bright magentas, and crisp whites throughout late spring and early summer. They repeat bloom if deadheaded consistently. They thrive in well-draining containers in full sun. They tolerate drought far better than most people expect. Zones 4 through 9. At patio table height, the fragrance fills an entire seating area. One pot. That is the impact. One pot on a table near where you sit, and your porch smells like a garden in the south of France from May through July. 2. Spillers. The cascaders. The softeners. The plants that drape over the edges of your containers and turn a pot into something that looks like it was designed by someone who knew what they were doing. 11. Golden creeping jenny. The designer waterfall. In the ground, this plant is aggressive. Spreads without apology. Colonizes. You plant it once and spend the next 3 years trying to contain it. In a container, confinement transforms it entirely. Lysimachia nummularia aurea, grown in a pot, produces exactly the cascading behavior that makes it problematic in a garden bed and channels it into something that looks extraordinary. Brilliant neon chartreuse leaves on trailing stems that drape over the rim of a container and fall 2, 3, 4 inches down the sides. In bright sun, the color is almost electric. It catches light in a way that makes darker containers feel illuminated. Professional designers use this plant constantly. They charge for the knowledge that a $6 plant in a pot can produce an effect that looks like something that cost $200 to design. Now you have that knowledge for free. Zones 3 through 9. In containers, it never escapes. It behaves perfectly within the boundaries of the pot. Water it consistently. Give it either sun or partial shade, and it will give you that cascading golden waterfall effect from May through October of every year. So what's the big meal with the upper key of Butler? The mistake is planting it in the ground first and assuming the container version will behave the same way. They are completely different experiences. The ground version invades. The container version performs. 12. Ajuga reptans, the tricolor shade spiller. Here is the plant I mentioned at the beginning, the one that will make professional designers quietly furious that you now know what they have been charging for. Ajuga reptans burgundy glow produces leaves that are 3 colors simultaneously. Cream at the margins, rose pink in the middle, deep purple at the heart. All on the same leaf. All on a low spreading plant that cascades over the rim of a shaded container with a weight and drama that nothing else in this price range produces. In spring, before almost anything else has woken up, short spikes of brilliant electric blue flowers push up from the foliage mat. Weeks before your peonies bloom, Weeks before your hostas are fully unfurled, a juga is already performing. Landscape designers use it to solve the specific problem of shaded containers where spillers typically run out of options. Most trailing plants want sun. A juga thrives in shade. It handles the deep shadow under a roof overhang, the north-facing corner, the porch where the sun never reaches. It does not just survive there, it flourishes. Zones 3 through 9. The design principle here is something you can apply across every container you own. A spiller with dramatic foliage color amplifies every other plant around it. The tricolor leaves of burgundy glow do not just soften the edge of the container. They make the hosta above them look richer. They make the hellebore beside them look more elegant. Every plant in the arrangement reads more clearly, more intentionally, because of the contrast the spiller creates at the base. That is what professional designers know that most home gardeners do not. The spiller is not an afterthought. The spiller is what makes the whole arrangement look designed. 13. Japanese forest grass. The golden fountain. Most ornamental grasses are brutal in containers. They get massive, they tip the pot over, they take up all the space and leave no room for anything else. By midsummer, they look like something that escaped from a highway median. Proconecloa macra, Japanese forest grass, is the exception to every rule that makes ornamental grasses difficult. It stays compact. It arches. Long, fine-textured blades cascade over the edge of the container in a genuine fountain shape, moving with every breath of air, catching light differently at every hour of the day. The golden varieties glow in morning sun, like the pot is lit from within. The variegated forms create a layered effect, green and gold striped, that no other grass produces. This plant loves partial shade. That is another exception. Most grasses need full sun. Hakonecloa performs beautifully in the dappled shade under a tree canopy, on a shaded porch, in the transitional spots where nothing else seems to fit. It grows slowly, which means the container stays proportional for years. By year 3, it is a dense, graceful mound that looks more expensive than anything you bought this spring at the annual flat price. Zones 5 through 9. Before the final section, 3 mistakes that kill more container perennials in America than cold weather, drought, and neglect combined. Mistake 1. The wrong drainage. The number 1 killer of container perennials is not underwatering. It is overwatering, combined with inadequate drainage. When roots sit in waterlogged soil, they cannot access oxygen. They suffocate and rot. By the time the foliage shows distress, the root damage is already irreversible. Every container needs a minimum of 3 drainage holes. Add a 2-inch layer of coarse gravel at the base before adding soil. Never place saucers under drought-tolerant perennials. Water should drain through and out of the container within 15 to 20 seconds of application. If it pulls longer than 30 seconds, your mix is too dense and your roots are already at risk. Mistake 2. The wrong container size. A perennial in a 10-inch container needs water every 1 to 2 days in summer. The same plant in a 24-inch container needs water once or twice per week. The same plant in a 24-inch container also has the thermal mass to protect its roots through a hard freeze that would kill the smaller pot entirely. Minimum size for every perennial on this list is 16 inches in diameter. Anything smaller defeats the entire purpose of low-maintenance perennial gardening. Mistake 3. The wrong soil. Never use standard garden soil. Too heavy, no drainage. Never use cheap potting mix. Too much bark, holds too much moisture for too long. The correct blend is 50% quality potting mix, 30% coarse perlite, 20% compost. It drains well, retains enough moisture, and feeds slowly through the season without synthetic fertilizer. Each spring, remove the top 2 inches and replace with fresh compost mixed with a slow-release granular fertilizer. 10 minutes per container, once per year. That is the complete annual soil maintenance for every plant on this list. Here is what this actually means across a lifetime of gardening. If you are currently spending $800 a year on annuals, and you replace those containers over the next 3 seasons with 13 perennials across multiple pots, the initial investment is roughly $150 to $250, one time. Year 2, $0 on replacement plants. Year 3, $0. Year 4, You are dividing the hostas and the heucheras and the catmint, generating $60 to $100 worth of free plants per container per division cycle. Over 20 years, the perennial gardener generates free plants, eliminates annual purchase costs, and builds a collection that gets more valuable, more established, and more beautiful every single year without starting over. The annual flower gardener spends the same $800 on year 20 that they spent on year 1, nothing to show for it, no accumulation, no compounding return, no root system that took a decade to develop. Just another flat cart, another receipt, and another summer watching a plant designed to die do exactly what it was designed to do. You now know the alternative. Agapanthus that detonates in globe flowers when you leave it alone. Hostas that illuminate slugs and grow into decade-long centerpieces. Rudbeckia that opens fully while every annual in your neighborhood is brown and finished. Heuchera that colors your containers in February. Hellebore that blooms through snow. Catmint that outperforms petunias for a fraction of the recurring cost. Plants that reward patience, plants that compound, plants that do not require your failure to survive. The garden center built its business on you not knowing any of this. Now you do. If this changed how you see your containers, share this video with one person in your life who is still buying the same flat of annuals every spring. One share. That is the only action that costs you nothing and gives them something that could save thousands of dollars over the next decade. And drop a comment below right now. Tell me which of these 13 plants you already grow, which one you are planting this season, and what state you are gardening in. I read every comment. I want to know where this community is building its containers across America. Subscribe if you have not already. Turn on the bell, because the next video goes just as deep, and your containers will never look the same.